Never too early, never too late. Always right on time to talk Big Ten college football. Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. Big Ten live show number 60 is coming your way for the next couple hours here at the Voice of College Football. Pull up a chair, enjoy, leave the drive into us, as somebody once said, and leave those comments and questions in the chat. Also, we have dropped the link in the chat. Give me a call. Let's talk Big Ten football. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. When you shop on Amazon, please use our link. It doesn't cost you a penny. Same shopping experience, still credits your account, still uses your account. So please use the Amazon link that we provide. Also, keep in mind that we are releasing all-time program rankings. What does that mean? We are going through every conference. And unlike anybody else out there, if you find a more exhaustive ranking system than the Voice of College Football, please show it to me. And if that does exist, and it probably does somewhere, most likely there's a team working on it. That would be my guess. There's an organization. It's 247 Sports. It's Bleacher Report. It's somebody has devised some kind of ranking system that involves a complete exhaustive look at, but this is pretty big right here. We review winning percentage all time, winning percentage during the college football playoff era, win percentage during the 21st century, winning percentage since 1970. And again, we put the all-time winning percentage first and foremost. AP poll points. That means there's a system that the AP's put together. It's rather complicated. Takes a math genius to figure out. No, I'm just kidding. Basically, if you are the national champion voted number one by the AP, you get 25 points. If you're number two, you get 24 points. If you're number three, you get 23 points. Pretty easy to figure out. Is it flawless? Of course not, because the AP poll is flawed. But over the course of 85 or so years since 1936, pretty darn reliable. So the AP poll points we factor in. Also, how many times these schools have finished in the final top 25, the final 10, the top 5. So we look at those 3 measurements. We're up to about 10 measurements at this point, but we're not done. Bowl wins, major bowl wins, national championships, conference championships, and get this, conference championship percentage. What is that, Mark? What is conference championship percentage? That means that you can't fairly evaluate Florida State having joined the ACC in 1992 versus the 7 or so schools that founded the ACC in 1953. There's no way they could have won as many ACC championships during that time. Therefore, conference championship percentage. Oklahoma, far and away, the most impressive when it comes to conference championship percentage that we just posted from the Big 12. 14 titles for the Sooners in 28 years of the Big 12. But we also look at, of course, their past championships in the Big 8. So we take both of those into consideration. Their current Big 12 championships, also how the schools performed in their previous conference. How about that? NFL draft selections, first round selections, All-Americans, Heisman Trophy winners, major award winners. So we value the other positions just as much as the quarterback. Might as well call it that, the Heisman Trophy Quarterback Award in recent times. All of that put together. And maybe I'm missing something. Yeah, we put all that together. We've released the Pac-12, the ACC, and now the Big 12. Check it out. The Big 10 is coming soon. We put that into a point system, and it is the perfect system. No, it's not a perfect system. Don't claim it to be the perfect system. That does not exist. There are a few other factors that I would like to include, but I'm a database of one. Therefore, yeah, I'm a database of one. And these are paying about a nickel an hour. So until we get the staff together and build out the database, I would love to dive into some other ones, but it is well beyond Winsipedia for all their help in compiling statistics. Thank you so much to the folks at Winsipedia. Check out the all-time program rankings. Share those with your friends. Get into debates. As I posted earlier today, I believe it was today. It might have been yesterday. I believe it was yesterday. On Thursday, I posted a poll of the worst college football program of all time. And there are about 7 or 8 schools in the running. Now, we will isolate this to the Big Ten. Of course, this is the Big Ten Live show. So leave your selections for the worst program in the history of the Big Ten. I think that's actually obvious. Poor, blank. It is obvious. You are the worst program in the history of the Big Ten. If we were talking back in 1985, I would have named somebody else. I would have named, yes, poor you. But now it's poor you. So worst program in college football. I had a lot of Iowa State fans coming after me because I put them on the list. We can only post 4 entries into a poll on X. So I went with Iowa State, Kansas, Duke, and Wake Forest. Now, Northwestern's in the running, Duke's in the running, Oregon State's in the running. Anybody else I missed? Those are pretty much the program. Kansas, I put them on the list. Yeah, Kansas, Iowa State, Wake, and Kansas. Iowa State, Wake, and Duke are in the poll, but I noted we've got some write-in candidates. Certainly include those as well. We received over 5,000 submissions to this poll about the worst program in the history of college football. I can't necessarily trust those poll results because, number one, we typically draw in from certain fan bases much greater than others, not just here on the channel, but on X. And I think that was pretty easy to see that they were voting against their rival, Hawkeye fans. But also, it becomes obvious when it's just a poll and you give 4 reasonable options. Obviously, everyone's going to make a reasonable selection because all 4 reasonable options are there and present. So you can't make a haphazard selection, one that doesn't make sense. However, once you start to read the comments, then you start to determine that some of these people just maybe didn't watch a college football game before 2021 and don't understand what all time or history means. We had many defenders of Iowa State, even though they have arguably the worst football program in the history of football programs. If you are watching and you're a Cyclones fan, thank you so much for watching. We appreciate you being here. And had a few of those comment to X and then also comment to the channel here in the last couple of days that were mighty annoyed and upset with me. But I also had an Iowa State fan or a Kansas State fan. I think I had one of each that actually acknowledged, yes, Mark, that is the truth. You're accurate. Our comment of the day, if we had such a thing, and we don't, and I believe I'm cutting off my hair that's quite spiky today because it got cut a few days ago. So let's do that. This was quite the gem of a genius comment coming into the channel today. So we posted our Big 12 all-time rankings. And sometimes on YouTube, it's difficult to find comments once they've been read and they've been responded to. So this might be difficult. I know how to find it. Here we go. So this is Big Ten related, I promise. Somewhat. So again, we posted the Big 12 all-time rankings. Like, look at this. Look at this information you don't get anywhere else. This is how many times these schools ranked in the top 5, in the top 10, and then also ranked, period. So we have... Oh, here we go. Front Run 3R587. I don't know if that's his given name or if that's a nickname. But anyway, don't listen to this guy. He's an Ohio State homer. Everything he says about other conferences is tainted. Okay. That logic in and of itself is moronic. Maybe you would be more apt to be tainted and biased in your perspectives on your own conference that contains the team that you root for, not other conferences, sir. And then, yes, my Ohio State fandom certainly gets in the way of me ranking Big 12 programs. Absolutely, it does. And certainly, especially since if you went to just about any other ranking system, there would be a whole lot of subjectivity to it, a lot of random thoughts and notions in there. Mine is strictly based on facts, statistics, compilations of the facts and the history and the results. I cannot in any way skew any of these numbers. None of them can be misconstrued in any such way. So I got to say I had fun responding by saying, absolutely right, Mr. Frontrunner, faceless, random, pointless human somebody. Yes, my fandom definitely leans me toward Utah because they wear red. No, actually, it's Cincinnati because they're in Ohio. No, wait a minute. It's Oklahoma State. That's it, because, of course, they're OSU. Oh, shoot, that's right. I forgot about Will Howard. Yeah, I'm a huge Kansas State fan. Wait a minute. Tom Herman coached at Houston, offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Yeah, that's my Big 12 team. Or is it Colorado? Because I really like Dallin Hayden. Oh, I'm so confused. So confused. My word. Yes. And I do this for a living. Oh, the first comment I see coming in from Mr. Mike Ford. My ex graduated from Kansas State University. Obviously, we were talking about the Big 12. Hell with them. Man, Mike has taken it against a complete alumni base, going back generations, for the misgivings of his ex-wife. Born in Leavenworth. Ooh, man, that sounds a bit nasty. I don't think we want to delve a little bit deeper. I think my comments concerning my ex are a little bit kinder. So again, the all-time program rankings, check them out, the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac-12. Yes, the Pac-12 makes total sense. It's history. It's in the books. It can't be changed. Boom. That's a final look at the Pac-12. Lock those numbers up. They are finé. I don't know French, but I believe that's correct. Please subscribe to our SEC channel. I know you're watching the Big Ten show right here, but subscribe to our SEC channel. And we've got some really exciting things concerning the SEC coming up here soon. But you are watching the Big Ten live show. Moose. Michigan is now the only school with 4 or more college football cover athletes. It just matters more. Darn, Moose, could you not have given me that information before I started my all-time program rankings? That would have been given more weight than anything, because Michigan's now the all-time football cover champion, whatever that means. Cover champion of what? I don't know. Maybe some kind of video game. Frank, Mark Rogers is the hardest working person I know. Frank has yet to hear my speech that you might be right. Well, first of all, if I am the hardest working person you know, Frank, you are surrounded by a bunch of lazy blanks, I was going to call them, bunch of lazy no goods. Number one. Number two, that doesn't say much for our society if I'm the hardest working. Number two, yeah, it is my goal to never be called that ever the rest of my life. That is truly my goal. I am going to be working half as hard this time next year. That's my goal. Half as hard. Making 10 times more money. So the stock market better hit. Mike says Big Ten fans get to have a say on everything. There are more Michigan and Ohio State fans on Matthew's stream than Texas fans. And that's a bit unfortunate, but we do appreciate you stopping by, Mike. So Mike leads me right into Monday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time. And good programming note. Thank you, Mike. Mike just knows subliminally that he is prompting me to another important announcement. I think he just knows this. He's got a sixth sense. And what that is that we will no longer be providing the Texas live show, Horns Huddle, here on the main channel. We are moving it where it belongs over on the Texas channel. So no more Horns Huddle on Monday night. No more Texas Live on Monday night, 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 Central, over on the Texas channel. So hopefully somebody shows up. We are building the Texas channel. Matthew doing a heck of a job. Sonny Verma, a heck of a job. And we are looking to build the Texas channel. When I mentioned a few minutes ago about possibly the worst program in the history of the Big Ten, Mike Ford says Illinois would be up there in worst, but they're beating us on the live sim right now. Oh, okay. We've got a Michigan-Illinois game going on the sim right now. Simulator. Got it. I was going to say simulcast. Simulator. I have nothing to do with those. If you're watching them on the Voice of College Football Network, again, I have nothing to do with those. They are simply being posted because people like them and they draw attention to the channel. Otherwise, I know nothing about it. Jackson Johnson says, worst program of all time in the Big Ten, I would say, comes down to Indiana and Rutgers. All right. Before I give what I think is a pretty definitive answer, and thank you for that, Jackson. You can go to X and vote in our poll that we released yesterday, the worst program in college football history. There it is. And Exploring with Ben's here. Check out the Oregon channel. They did a live show talking Ducks the other night there. Ben and company on the Oregon channel. Check it out. All right. Nobody else had a guess. Nobody else had an opinion on the worst program in the history of the Big Ten. It's Indiana. It's Indiana. If we were here 40 years ago, we would have agreed that it's Northwestern. But Northwestern has been so much better. And I had some people comment back to me that Northwestern should have been on that list, or Northwestern is the worst program of all time, or Northwestern is certainly worse than Iowa State. Okay, first of all, we're not talking about right this second. We're talking about all time. And I was not putting any kind of emphasis on any particular time period, just all of it put together. So, of course, with Kansas State has a horrific all-time record. Horrific. 10 percentage points less than Kansas, the Jayhawks, who have been horrific themselves lately for a long, long time. But Kansas State under Bill Snyder, of course, has elevated quite a bit. So Northwestern, man, in the 80s, they were awful. They were pretty much awful their entire history outside of Ara Parsegian. But this guy was arguing Iowa State against Northwestern, and Northwestern, shoot, they've won 3 Big Ten championships since 1995, 95, 96, 2000. They went to a couple championship games here recently. I know Iowa State had 1 year But yeah, when it comes to Big Ten football, Indiana takes it. 418 win percentage all time. 418. Northwestern 456. It's almost 40 percentage points higher. Rutgers 492. Now, let's understand that Rutgers, of course, played Big East football against lesser competition for a long, long time. And before that, they were an independent. We'd have to dive into those schedules. But I think it's clearly Indiana, having only won 3 bowl games. 3 bowl games. That's how many bowl games they've won. There are teams like Maryland's won 4 bowl games in a row. We're not talking about Alabama. We're talking about Maryland, 4 in a row, and Indiana's won 3, period. Jackson, letting everyone know, if you enjoy exclusive live streams, watch parties, predictions, betting advice, and insider looks in all of college football, we're going to have to tweak that delivery a bit, but just follow us on Patreon. Get yourself either a Patreon membership or Voice of College Football membership here on the main channel. And basically what you get there is you get to deliver all sorts of emojis. You get a shout out. You get an exclusive piece of content that per request, every month per request. And we're still kind of cleaning up and working on what else, in addition to the Discord link. So check out the Discord link. You get the Discord link, Talk College Football 24/7, 365, along with the emojis that are about 8 in total at this point. So if you're an Oregon fan, Michigan fan, or USC fan, you would be especially interested in the emojis that you can throw at folks. All right. We wanted to get to Big Ten post-spring power rankings. And let's see what people have to say. And let's see if we find some issues here, because you can't necessarily trust or put much stock in many of the things that you read. For example, there's some soul out there. I don't know the guy, don't know his work, don't know his name offhand. I should know it by now because I've seen it listed about 52 times on social media in the last few days, because he is taking an absolute pounding because he released not a top 10, not a top 25, a top 30 in college football. And who did he leave out? Notre Dame. Notre Dame, not in the top 30 in America, and he is taking a beating out there, which I thought maybe he just overlooked them. I've done that. I've released videos and thought, crap, I forgot about them. Or somebody pointed out, shoot, I forgot about that. It's happened. Not this guy. Fully took into consideration Notre Dame and did not put them in his top 30. All right, let's see these fine publications and their Big Ten power rankings, and we'll see if we can poke holes in these. We have the fine folks at Athlon Sports. And who wants to bet, as we look at 3 different power ranking sets, that these are almost going to be identical? Ohio State's number 1. Ohio State is almost a consensus number 1 in college football from what I've seen. And certainly Athlon's is not going to tell us anything we didn't know. They did a phenomenal job bringing in talent in the offseason with Caleb Downs on the defensive side at safety. And then, of course, Will Howard at quarterback, Quinshon Judkins at running back. And I'm going to say just as important as Ohio State's work in the transfer portal was Ohio State's recruiting and NIL initiative to keep players from going to the NFL draft. They could have been just torn apart. The projection was that this was going to be Ohio State's big NFL draft in 2024. Well, that's coming in 2025 because guys like Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, and Emeka Buka, and who am I thinking of? My goodness, I'm blanking on the corner. Their best cornerback. Good Lord. I'm in trouble if I can't come up with that name tonight. Anyway, oh my word. All right, Oregon coming up here next. Deep roster, fortified with a couple of transfers. The more I look into Oregon, and I got a deep dive position by position with Spencer McLaughlin from Locked On Ducks a few weeks ago as we went through Oregon, and we went for an hour on Oregon personnel. Check out the videos on the Ducks channel. I'm really impressed with Oregon. I am going to, at this point, if my mindset is still the same in August, I will highly consider Oregon to win the Big Ten championship. If you figure they're as good as Ohio State or close to Ohio State, consider these two aspects of the race. One would be, of course, Oregon plays Ohio State at home in one of the more difficult places to play in all of college football. Now, I don't predict conference races based on where games are. And this is an issue that I see all over the place with people making predictions. It's ridiculous. I see this every year. I will go through people's predictions because I am, for as much as I don't watch other people's channels or don't go on sites, when it's August and there are predictions, I'm kind of a sucker to look at the predictions and see. Sometimes I have my weak moments. And what I notice is there's this focus all the time on where the games are. I may actually do a video series on home field advantage. And I may be wrong. I may be wrong. Yes, there is home field advantage. It exists. Absolutely. It doesn't exist as much as people think it does. I see people generally make predictions, and then any toss-up game, they simply just default to the home team. Oh, Penn State's at Ohio State. Okay, that game. Ohio State, Michigan. Since Michigan's been good, since they've elevated, a lot of people have just defaulted. Oh, they're in Columbus this year. Ohio State's going to win. Oh, they're in Michigan. Michigan's going to win. And they do that with every conference. Alabama, LSU. Okay, they're in Death Valley this year. Okay, LSU, I'm going to pin them to pull off a slight upset. Clemson, Florida State. Okay, they're in Tallahassee. Florida State's going to win. Not really. It is a consideration. It means something, absolutely. It means about 55-45 on average. And maybe for the really, really tough places to play, 60-40. That doesn't mean that LSU, Ohio State, Alabama only win 60% of the games at home. Obviously not. They win 90-some% of their games at home, but they are going to walk through most of those teams anyway. That means we'd have to come up with some kind of formula. And really, this is for a mathematician to figure out to the hilt, but we'd have to figure out some type of statistical formula of how many times. Well, we could basically, this would be slightly skewed, not in any particular direction, but it's slightly, what's the statistical polling term for it? The variation or the deviation would be not exact to where you would want it to be, but you could basically take every game that involved a difference in record, a difference in the record for those two teams by the end of the season, and then just count up the number of times that the home team with a worse record won the game, meaning that by the end of the season, the team that's better should have a better record. Therefore, how many times did home field come into advantage to determine a team with a lesser record, a worse record, to pull off the upset at home against a better team versus how many times did that happen on the road? And I guarantee over time that there are more upsets pulled off at home than on the road, correct? However, not as many as you would think. It's not like for every 100 upsets in college football, 89 of them are pulled off by the home team and 11 from the road team. 60-40. So again, these folks at Athlon have Oregon number 2. I'm impressed with the Ducks. I think their defensive line's a bit thin. Michigan, good call by Athlons, I believe, right here. I believe that Michigan is certainly in contention for a Big Ten championship. I'm going on record right now that I will be considering Michigan to win the Big Ten this year. Elite defense, once again. Yes, they lost 13 players to the NFL. I think Michigan people have overplayed the depth, the development, and the culture and the recruiting gems, the recruiting diamonds in the rough, not the recruiting rankings. They've overplayed it from one end of the spectrum to basically say, it's going to be easy to replace all these guys. Michigan detractors, Michigan haters, and just general college football people have taken the exact opposite lean, which is in air as well. That Michigan's going to fall apart. They don't have Jim Harbaugh anymore, J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum. They lost a lot of great players on defense. Their linebackers, Mike Sanderstill, etc. Forget it. Their top 2 receivers. If any team in America could get away with not having the best wide receivers, it would be this team right here. However, Sharon Moore has never been a head coach. That would be another interesting stuff. I've got to start jotting down these ideas because here's the next one. How successful are first-year head coaches who have never been a head coach before? First-year head coaches in the Power 5 who have never been a head coach. Do we have anyone like that currently in the Big Ten outside of Sharon Moore? Mike Loxley, head coach. Kurt Signetti, head coach. Greg Schiano, head coach. Ryan Day, never a head coach, took over a fairly talented roster, albeit. So that's a bit of an aberration right there in regards to the system and the culture and the roster that he took over being one of the best in America. However, we would have to include it in our review. Ryan Day would be the one coach. Of course, David Braun at Northwestern, never a head coach, went 8-5 last year, did a remarkable job, should be the coach of the year nationally. I don't know how that wound up, if it was Kalen DeBoer or if it was David Braun or possibly Mike Norvell. Whoever won the coach of the year last year, I believe it should have gone to David Braun. So we've got Day, Braun, and I believe everyone else in the Big Ten, Luke Fickell, Matt Rule, PJ Fleck, Kirk Ferentz, never, we'd have to differentiate between maybe never a head coach period or never an FBS head coach. So that would be the determination to make. But could be an interesting lineup of coaches to review. First-time head coaches and how they fared. Elsewhere in the Big Ten, Penn State. And we know from reviewing the last 10 years with the 14 playoff that there is no team in college football, no program in college football, no coach in college football, James Franklin, who will, well, we don't know if they will, but they would have benefited from the 12-team playoff as much as Penn State. Penn State would have reached a 12-team playoff more than Michigan. I believe the numbers were in the last 10 years, Ohio State 10, of course, Penn State 6, Michigan 5. And then the other teams that would have reached a 12-team playoff would have been Iowa in 2015, Michigan State in 2014, in addition to, of course, making it in 2015, Wisconsin in 20. They would have been borderline after they got blown out by Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship in 2014, and Wisconsin would have made it in 2017. Think about the 2017 season. Wisconsin played Ohio State pretty tough in the Big Ten Championship game. They lost 27-21. They had the ball on the final drive, couldn't do anything with it, 3 and out, ball game. But if they could have somehow found a way to score a touchdown to win that game, they would have been in the college football playoff, and Alabama would have been out, the eventual champion. And we would have had Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, Wisconsin. How about that? How about CFP near misses or what ifs? And what is the other idea I had for a video since we've been talking? There was one about 10 minutes ago. Shoot. It'll come back to me. USC at number 5. So I'm right on with the first 5. I believe Ohio State has the best team in the Big Ten. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to win the Big Ten. A date at Oregon. So that could swing the whole conference race. In terms of, that could either swing the conference race if the loser of that game loses another game. Like if Ohio State goes out to Oregon, loses, and then loses to Michigan, look out. They may not make it. Those games could obviously, there could just be a rematch. So with USC, you've got Miller Moss stepping in for Caleb Williams at quarterback. I have noticed our buddy Tim Prangley, who, of course, is the anchor of everything we do on the USC channel, has been posting his photos on Instagram from USC spring practice. Excellent photos by Tim, but he is bullish on USC. No big surprise to anyone. Thinks USC is going to take the Big Ten by storm. Big concerns here. D'Anton Lynn, excellent defensive coordinator coming in from UCLA, has much work to do. Okay, number 6 is Iowa. And we know that Iowa's going to have a tremendous defense led by a linebacking core that might not just be the best in the Big Ten, but the best in college football. As is mentioned there, I certainly agree with that. Corey Bratta and myself have already discussed that. Tim Lester, the new defensive or offensive coordinator. And what about the pickup this week of Brendan Sullivan? Moving from Northwestern to Iowa. Now, is he an insurance policy for Cade McNamara, or just flat out, is there competition for the quarterback job at Iowa? I say the latter. if I am Iowa, in no way does Cade McNamara just automatically get the number one job. He has not earned it. He earned it at Michigan in 2021, 3 years ago, at Michigan, at another school. No, Brendan Sullivan, to me, is not an insurance policy for Cade McNamara. Brendan Sullivan is a viable candidate for the starting job at Iowa. He has thrown 200 passes in the Big Ten. He has completed 69% of his passes at Northwestern. So he has not received the most help of anyone in terms of skill position talent around him. And he's also not going to get that kind of help at Iowa. But what he will have at Iowa that he did not have, in addition to a defense and a special teams that's going to keep them in every game where he doesn't have to score 35 points, he can score 17 points and win games. But in addition to that, one of the best linebacking or one of the best tight end rooms in college football and a great stable of running backs. Iowa probably has the best running back room in the Big Ten outside of Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon. Those are the four best running back rooms in the Big Ten, and Iowa is fifth. All right. We have opened up the phone lines. The StreamYard link is in the chat. I want to remind everyone to join us here at the Voice of College Football, and that we've got a morning show Monday through Thursdays. Wake Up College Football. Join us at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. First call, Nick in here. Nick, what's going on?
How's it going, Mark? Can you hear me?
I am doing well. I got you. How are you?
Good. I'm good. Ready for the weekend. Great weather too, by the way. Wanted to get your thoughts on. Don't know if you went over it. I just joined a couple minutes ago. Thoughts on Nebraska and expectations for the upcoming season?
Well, they've got a big wild card at quarterback, not from a talent standpoint, but of course, anytime you go with a true freshman at quarterback, and they most likely will, and if they don't go with a true freshman at quarterback, then they're in deep trouble because Heinrich Harburg is not a Big Ten first-string quarterback, but he's had to be there. So Dylan Raiola had a great spring game, and everybody was wowed and amazed, including myself. However, it was a spring game, and he is going to take his knocks in this conference, but he seems to be the real deal. So I think that bodes extremely well for the long term for 2025. For 2024, I think it spells inconsistency because we know that their skill position players, their running backs, their offensive line, average in the Big Ten. They've made a lot of strides on the offensive line to make that better. I believe in Matt Rule. I do think that Matt Rule's an extremely good coach, one of the top half coaches in the Big Ten. I think he knows what he's doing. He's a grinder, and he's working extremely hard. I think they don't have any outstanding qualities on that team. And we talk Nebraska football every week. So I think I've got a pretty good read on Nebraska because I got a guy in Justin Adams who knows them through and through. And he can't really sell me that they're that good at anything, but they're also not that bad at anything. Now, Nick, the last thing I'll say is last year, they basically blew games under Matt Rule almost to the script, just like Scott Frost.
It's their way. It's their tradition lately.
That is their tradition. And they carried it through, and it didn't matter who was on the sideline. Maryland, Iowa, Wisconsin, these games, Michigan State, they were all blown in the final minute.
Mm-hmm.
So with a true freshman quarterback starting, it's somewhat unlikely that that's going to turn around, that you're going to put a game on his shoulders and he's going to be the guy that's going to teach a team to win. They're a 6-6, 7-5 football team.
Oh, really? Wow. Well, what were they last year? I can't remember.
They were 5-7.
Okay. Well, yeah, that makes sense. I think Dylan Raiola, I did watch just the highlights of the spring game, and like you said, it's just a spring game, but you can see why he was a top-rated quarterback, 5-star quarterback. He seems like he's going to be the type of player who, once he figures it out, he's going to have a steep incline as far as getting better. My biggest concern, if I was a Nebraska fan, is their receivers. I could see those, just him throwing a lot of good balls, especially later in the year. But I don't know. They have that big tight end, Fedone.
Yep.
But I don't think they really have a dude at the wide receiver position, do they? Like at all?
No, I don't think that they're dudes. Like if you're thinking Ohio State kind of dudes or USC kind of dudes at wide receiver. No,
or even
like
a Cornelius Johnson.
Do they have anyone like that? Well, they've got Jamal Banks. He came in from Wake Forest.
Oh.
And he caught 58 or 60 balls last year. So he played pretty well as a starting receiver in the ACC with no quarterback. And they picked up Isaiah Nair, who did nothing at Texas, basically wasn't because Texas was excited about him coming in. But previously at Wyoming, he was an all Mountain West Conference receiver.
Interesting. Okay, so where do you think? Okay, yeah. All right, so they're going to be lower if you're thinking 5-7, 6-6. What do you?
I said 7-5, 6-6.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Got thoughts on Wisconsin? Are you? Well, let me put it this way: when Matt Rule and what's his face, Luke Fickell, came in, those going to be better than Nebraska, or?
Well, they did last year. They were a better team, not by a ton, but 7-5 is better than 5-7, and they beat them head to head. But again, it was an overtime game, so not much better. Okay, Tyler Van Dyke. Now, understand that Nebraska ran the ball more than all but 3 or 4 teams in the country. They had no confidence throwing the ball. And so they're prepared to play that kind of football and probably still will to a certain extent because of a freshman quarterback. But they're obviously going to lean on him more and more if he proves in the early games that he's up to it. And also consider with Nebraska's schedule that their schedule, the first 7 games or so, they could win all those games. They will probably be a favorite the first 7 games of the season. Now, most likely they're going to blow 1 or 2, but then the last 5 games, they hit a rough stretch. Wisconsin brings in Tyler Van Dyke from Miami, who, if he's Tyler Van Dyke of 2021, if they're able to, between Luke Fickell and their offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, are able to get his head in order and teach him how to read defenses, because he has an issue with telegraphing passes and not seeing and reading defenses, because he threw a ton of picks last year and at the worst times. But if they revert him back to 2021 for about 8 or 9 games in 2021, Tyler Van Dyke was just about as good as anyone in the country. So he has tremendous arm talent. And he's got some good receivers with Will Pauling in particular. They lose Bo Allen, but they got Ches Malusi, and his health is always in question. He's the Clemson transfer from a few years ago, but when he plays, he's really good. They'll have a good offense if they stay healthy.
All right, cool. So as far as your two front runners in the Big Ten, I'm assuming you have Ohio State, Oregon, pretty clearly.
Not clearly. I have
Okay, so
Ohio
what?
State, Oregon, and Michigan clearly as the three best teams in the Big Ten.
Okay, and then you have a significant drop off, or just
Decided
line?
drop off. Yes.
Okay, but yeah, obviously Michigan's going to come down to their QB. Ohio State's probably going to come down somewhat to their QB, but I was looking at Oregon's schedule here, and then it's looking like that Oregon. So Ohio State has to go to Oregon, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's going to be a huge game.
Yep. Mid-October.
Do they do not? I don't think they've announced a time. Isn't there after a certain amount of time they won't do night games anymore? Or since it's at Oregon, can they?
Yes, the Big Ten does not like to play night games in November.
Okay.
However, didn't they change that last year because of the NBC schedule? Yeah, they had night games in November, but they're not going to have many.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the good news is Michigan gets Oregon at home and a little bit later, so November 2nd. So maybe that'll give them some time to figure it out. But yeah, that Ohio State Oregon game right there in the middle of the schedule is sticking out a lot. That's going to determine quite a bit. And then how many? I guess I haven't looked at Penn State's schedule because I try to not bring this up too much because I could just go on and on about it. But James Franklin and this Penn State team, it is unreal to me. Now, I know they've been a double-digit win team the last couple of years, but their two biggest games, they just blow it. And it's not even that they're losing. I'm not saying anything new here. It's the fact that dude, any time in a meaningful game, you just look at his face. It's like deer in the headlights. He's gonna do something stupid. You just wait for him to screw up. I've never seen a coach go, or at least just not like this, at that type of program where they consider or they want to consider themselves national championship contenders, how he has not gotten more heat or pressure. Because
pressure from who? You don't think he gets heat?
I don't see much. Maybe I'm not looking in the right place.
I see it all over the place.
Okay.
I don't see it necessarily from Penn State fans. That's what's funny is I see it from other people that just say, hey, what's the deal? This team can't get by the other two. And when are they going to do something? Or is James Franklin's job on the line? But when I talk to Penn State people, they seem to just believe we've got a great program. We're going to continue. And obviously, the thought process also has to be this 12-team playoff is coming. And so this series of games against Ohio State and Michigan, number one, aren't going to be every year against both of them. And number two, aren't as important as they were. And you don't need to win them.
Yeah, I get that to a degree, but still, him as an in-game coach, what are they? Okay, so we're just cool with, as a Penn State fan, how are you going to even tout that as to, to be prideful in that anyway? Like, oh yeah, we made the playoffs now. Well, you couldn't really make the real playoffs, the 14 playoffs. You weren't good. They had
They can't do anything about that now.
No, I understand that, but it's like, you make the playoffs now. He's still a bad in-game coach. They're probably going to get smoked.
Well, if that happens, then we'll see what Penn State's standards are. I would guess, Nick, that their standards are going to be as long as they make the playoffs the first couple of years. If they lose playoff games 41-10, James Franklin is still going to have a job.
All right.
I'm just saying, I can almost guarantee that this is going to be the thought process. We're starting a 12-team playoff. Let's just get to the playoffs. And let's say they go 10-2 the next 2 years and they get embarrassed in the first round of the playoffs. They lose to Tennessee and they lose to Clemson the next 2 years in the playoffs by 3 touchdowns. He is still going to have a job. Now, after 3 years, 4 years, then it's going to be okay. We've hit this milestone. You've taken us to the playoffs. Now you have to extend it past there. That is my guess. Of course, I'm guessing what administrators are going to think, but that would be my guess of what their mindset's going to be.
All right. Well, yeah, you're probably right. That makes some sense. I can't. That's just really interesting that Penn State fans haven't. I mean, just I don't know if I'd call it excuse making, but that they're not demanding a little bit more is
look at
interesting.
this. Look at this, Nick. As you well know, they don't play Michigan. So let's say they do what they always do. They lose to Ohio State. Okay, they can still lose another game. And who are they going to lose to? Are they going to lose to maybe at USC or maybe at Wisconsin? But even if they lose one of those games, they are going to be in the playoffs at 10-2.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. But I also think too, it's not like you make the 12-team playoff, that's fine, but it's not losing in the 12-team playoff is not the same as losing in the 4-team playoff. So you're making the playoffs, but you're essentially still the same program. You're not actually growing. It's just the landscape around you changed so that the numbers look better for you.
Absolutely.
But I mean, that still doesn't take away how bad of an in-game coach he is, how he just seems to gaff himself to death, essentially.
Yes.
And but yeah, you're probably right. Maybe with the new playoff and all that stuff, if they make the 12-team playoff and they get destroyed going in there, I don't think anybody's going to give them any more credit.
Oh, I don't think so either. No, I totally agree with you. And I will say that I'm rarely surprised at moves that are made, but I would be somewhat surprised, pretty surprised, if that happens exactly the way I just laid it out this year and they fire him. I think it's a playoff year for them. Get to the playoffs.
I get Penn State. I mean, regardless of what we think of him as an institution, it's difficult to justify a guy who has won a Big Ten title, albeit somewhat of a Mickey Mouse Big Ten title. I mean, they lost to Michigan by 40 points?
Why was that a Mickey Mouse Big Ten title?
They got blown because they
lost one game in the conference.
That was to Michigan? Yeah, they lost 49-10 to Michigan.
Yeah.
So I guess if you don't want to call it Mickey Mouse, that's fine. That's fine. But you lose to Michigan 49-10, and you basically beat Ohio State on a fluky special teams field goal block.
Yep.
And then you watch Michigan and Ohio State go to overtime. So you could make the argument Penn State was the third best team in the conference.
Well, they probably were.
That still won the championship. So, yeah. I mean, good for them. Good that it worked out. But you lose by 40 points to a team in your conference, and you still, in your own division, and you still get a crack at it.
Ohio State lost by 4 touchdowns to Iowa and lost by 4 touchdowns to Purdue, and they won the Big Ten championship both years.
It's the Urban Meyer special.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm serving you up the same exact situation. Ohio State lost one game.
What years were those?
2017 and 18. The very next 2 years, they lost one game in the Big Ten. Now, I'll throw a point on your side. Penn State also lost a non-conference game. Penn State also lost a non-conference game to Pitt, who wasn't very good. Now, of course, Ohio State didn't do that. And then Ohio State also went and won the Rose Bowl and the Cotton Bowl, and Penn State lost the Rose Bowl. So I'm not comparing to say Penn State was as good as Ohio State those 2 years. I'm just saying that shouldn't invalidate their conference.
No, I didn't say it invalidated. No,
you said you called it Mickey Mouse.
I'm being a little tongue in cheek. Just it's all part of that sphere of James Franklin that just seems to prevent your team from winning in big moments.
That even if you do something good, that it's not really good.
No, I think it's good. I just think it's just funny the way that worked out. Your two biggest games of the season that you've struggled against. One you get absolutely steamrolled, and then the other you went on a fluke special teams. I mean, it happens to other teams. I'm just saying. But yeah, I also find it interesting. So you're putting Michigan in the tier with Oregon and Ohio State.
Yes.
You must feel that they're gonna figure out their quarterback situation, at least to some degree.
Yeah, well enough.
Okay.
I think their biggest decision to make, based on what I saw in the spring game, let's say the spring game is a perfect reflection of how good these quarterbacks are and how close they are. I think that their determination is more about not who the best quarterback is, if they're that close. I think it's more about, what do we want our offense to look like? Do we want our offense to look like Alex Orji running the read option over and over and over and over, and him basically being taught to drop back to pass, look for one receiver? If he's not open, tuck it and run. Basically Jalen Milroe style. Although if he throws the deep ball like Jalen Milroe, then forget it. They're in good shape. That's a lot to ask, because for as much as Jalen Milroe had to develop last year, he threw a tremendous deep ball. And I'm not talking about just he could just chuck it like Jamarcus Russell. I'm talking about accuracy on the deep ball. So if you want to run an offense like that, where your quarterback is a threat running the ball, then you go with Orji. If you want a more traditional Michigan offense, like they had under Wilton Spade and Jake Rudock and those types, then you choose Davis Warren and you run more of a play action. You're heavy on the run still, but you know that your quarterback is going to hit Colston Loveland 65 or 70 times and move the sticks.
Yeah. Yeah, they're definitely going to have to utilize Colston Loveland. I don't think they're going to have, unless did they get I guess they did go back and get Amarian Walker, so he's about 6'4". But I heard rumors they might put him in a defense again, so I don't think they're going to have the size at wide receiver to be throwing it very deep. But who knows? I could be wrong. But yeah, it'll be interesting. So you're expecting, I'm assuming, at least 2 Big Ten teams to make the playoff, if not not
absolutely.
3. Okay.
If the Big Ten doesn't have 3 teams in the playoffs,
it's a black eye.
Yeah, I don't know what would have happened.
Yeah, that is tough, because Penn State's Oregon schedule, besides the Ohio State game, Oregon could go undefeated. They could easily. I mean, Oregon's going to win double-digit games.
Put it this way, Nick. If the Big Ten would have had those 4 teams in last year, now I know what people's rebuttal is going to be that all their schedules would have been tougher. Number one, that's not necessarily the case. It usually is the case, but it's not necessarily the case. Number two, all those teams could have lost another game. Washington could have lost another game, still made the playoffs. Ohio State could have lost another game, still made the playoffs. Michigan, and Penn State lost 2 games, and they had to play Ohio State and Michigan. So replace Ohio State or Michigan with somebody else that they would have lost to. Oregon, they're having the same record. The Big Ten would have had 5 teams in the playoffs last year.
Yeah. Now, one last thing.
Because not to cut you off, just to finish my thought, because the ACC would have had 1, Florida State. Nobody else had the record to make it, and the Big 12 would have only had 1, because their championship game loser was Oklahoma State, who was 9-4. So you would have had 2 conferences only get their champion in. Then you would add the Big 10 with 5. So what's that? 7. The group of 5 makes 8. And then the SEC would have had the other 4.
I wouldn't put Florida State in no matter what. That's just me.
With a 12-team playoff?
Oh no, not a no.
Yeah, I'm
not
talking about a 12. I'm talking about last
Yeah.
year being a 12-team playoff and the Pac-12 being gone and merged into the Big Ten.
Okay.
That would have been your scenario. You would have had 5 Big Ten teams in the playoffs.
Okay, so you would say at least 3, at the very least 3.
Oh,
Otherwise,
absolutely. If we're sitting here in January and there's 2 Big Ten teams in the playoffs, the season was a disaster. I don't know what happened.
I'll tell you what happened. Ohio State lost to Marshall. That's what happened.
Yeah, they lost a bunch of non-conference games and they cannibalized each other. Wisconsin got good and won some games. USC outplayed itself to an extent, but not
Turns
good
out they
enough
had a
to make
better
the playoffs.
defense. USC had a better defense than what we thought.
Iowa pulled off upsets. Like the middle tier pulled off upsets and brought down the big boys and drove them out of the playoffs.
It would be fun. I'd sign up for a year of that. Just complete and total chaos.
Well, I would sign up for it. I'm fine with it, but I don't think this chat wants to see only 2 Big Ten teams in the playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it'll stay that way. If it did happen, it'll probably be a fluke year. But it'd be fun to see some carnage. It'd be fun to see Illinois blow the doors off Oregon. I'd sign up for that. Brett Bielema after the game, shirtless, Alrighty. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. So I'm going to sit back, enjoy my summer, and just wait for James Franklin to screw up Penn State season again. So.
All right.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate that. Nick gave us a visual there with Brett Bielema. Is that game at Austin Stadium? Regardless of where it is, a shirtless Brett Bielema after the victory over Oregon. We're going to take a call from Porter. The link is in the chat, but we've got a super chat to catch up on. Oh, no. Erica, she doesn't like PJ Fleck. I don't know why she doesn't like PJ Fleck, except for Iowa fans, of course, don't like Minnesota people. So there's the rivalry. But aside from getting cheated out of last year's win, Erica, your team beats them every year. So that's not an issue. Mickey Mouse is PJ Fleck. I think PJ Fleck's an excellent head coach who's done a pretty remarkable job for the most part at Minnesota. Now, this year's team might be a bit rough. Now, this year may be difficult for Minnesota to forge together 4 wins. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football, Porter.
Good evening, Mark.
Good evening. How are you?
Hey, good. Hope you're well. I'm enjoying all your content, including your. As a person of faith, I've enjoyed your biblical stuff too.
Oh,
it's really,
thank you.
really good.
I appreciate that.
Hey, I wasn't going to talk about this, but with Erica on or in the chat, hey, why does help me understand this? I'm not a Big Ten guy, but I didn't call about this. I want to at least touch on this. Is everybody is critical of Franklin and Penn State a lot, and he deserves it because none of these games have really been close. But at the same time, what is really everybody considers Penn State the number 3 team in the Big Ten. But I mean, I remember some recent teams for Iowa. Didn't Iowa go undefeated in the regular season recently? And
2015.
Why is Iowa not considered the 3rd best team in the Big Ten? It seems like some of these years they've actually done better than Penn State, and I've been very impressed with what they've done. I was very impressed. Obviously, it was a ways ago, but when they won that Orange Bowl against Georgia Tech, that was very impressive. So I don't know why people just assume that Penn State is the number 3 team in the Big Ten.
Do you want a recent synopsis?
I guess it goes back to, what is it, just because they won the conference? What is that, 16, 17 they won the conference? Is that why they get a lot more cachet?
Not really. They just have a better record, and they've played better against better schedules, and they've won New Year's 6 games.
That's true. So, yeah. Did they win the Rose Bowl a couple years ago?
They won the Rose Bowl. They won James Franklin has won the Fiesta Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, and the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I guess I didn't. Well, he won the Cotton Bowl against, what was that? Was that Western Michigan or something like
Memphis.
that? Memphis, yeah. I knew it was
yeah.
Group of
He
five.
beat Washington in the Fiesta Bowl, and he beat Utah in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
And he lost to SC on a walk-off field goal in the Rose Bowl. That's much better than what Iowa's done in those seasons.
That's true. Okay.
Iowa's been living
You're
in
right.
the Citrus Bowl and the Holiday Bowl during those years.
That's true. I can see that. You're probably right. I guess for some reason I just remember Iowa going undefeated one year, and obviously it wasn't the prettiest team, but it seemed like was it undefeated regular season or something like that?
2015. And they lost the Big Ten championship by a nose to Michigan State. And then Christian McCaffrey basically ran against air in the Rose Bowl. What was that game? This game was the halftime score was like 28-0.
Oh, okay.
I think it was 42-16, something like 45-16. Yeah, they just got embarrassed in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah. Well, I always kind of liked Iowa growing up. I mean, I always liked Hayden Fry. I think he was from the South, by the way.
Yeah, he's a Texas guy.
Texas, okay.
Yeah, I like Iowa as well. Yeah, 45-16, 35-0 at half.
I just don't see how you can have an offense that bad, but when I think of Iowa back in the 80s, I mean, Chuck Long was like throwing it all around the field. I mean, the guy was one of the best players in college football. And anyway, hey, I love the series that you're doing now about ranking the conferences or the teams within the conferences. I think it's great content for the off season. What some of the criteria? What is kind of giving you pause? Some of the criteria on how you're breaking this down, because obviously not everybody's going to do it the same way that you're doing it, but I think you're doing a really good job. But what is really, when did you kind of have to just? It was hard for you to make a decision on, I guess, given more points to certain criteria.
Yeah. So here are the difficult landmines for me. Number one, I'm basically going cross-eyed, going through all these numbers and so forth and adding them up. But it's basically, number one, think about it, Porter. Conference championships are difficult because, number one, you have schools entering leagues at different times. So I've tried to compensate that by doing a conference, as you've seen, a conference championship percentage. For example, once we get to the SEC, Arkansas and South Carolina only have had since 1992 to win the SEC, and Texas A&M and Missouri. So I've totaled all the conference championships that those schools have won, regardless of where they've been won. And then I've also just taken the percentage of time that those schools have been in that conference and how many conference championships they have. Now, I think that's pretty fair, except for we've had a lot of teams elevate from group of five levels, like Utah and TCU, who have been dominant as group of five teams, elevated, certainly after a couple rough years, been able to elevate and be competitive at this level, but their conference championships shouldn't be as weighted as heavily. But I'm not going to go through some crazy formula to try to figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're doing the best you can. I just the thing that, and I think I've said this on a few of the comments, is when someone like an Oklahoma, and I know 50 conference championships that's an impressive sounding number. Let's just say that. But when you're in a conference like the Big Eight, where there's really only you and Nebraska for decade after decade after decade, I mean, you're pretty much sharing the conference championship every year.
Pretty much.
I don't think there's somewhat of that in the Big Ten, but I don't. But obviously the Iowas and Wisconsins and Michigan States will come up and challenge the two big ones. But
Ohio State and Michigan only really had a 10-year run where they just completely locked the conference down.
Yeah, was that the one in the 70s when they talk about the 10-year
Yeah,
war?
basically the 70s and the
Yeah.
first few years of the 80s.
Well, but how do you agree with me though that the Big Eight was just for I guess my whole thing is we have fought. I mean, one of my favorite things that we accomplished in 2022, my alma mater, University of Georgia, is that we passed Tennessee in conference championships in the SEC. I know, obviously, winning the national championship was more important, but that was a big accomplishment because we have kind of been in this group of LSU and Tennessee and not necessarily Auburn, because Auburn for years never won a conference championship. I think they went like 30 something years, but I guess my point is it's kind of nice to break out of that pack, and now we're considered, or just based strictly on SEC championships, Georgia has the second most behind Bama. So I guess my concern is when you do the SEC, did you say you are going to lump Texas in there and then Texas and Oklahoma, but then bring it back?
Because in a sense, even though they have not played their history in the SEC, I want to make a comparison to show this is who they've been throughout history as compared to all these teams in the SEC. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, I just, I guess my whole thing is just, and I don't know how you do this, but just, it's so hard to win an SEC championship. And when you see Oklahoma have a run like they had recently in the Big 12 where they won like 6 in a row, and when you see what they did in the Big 8 when you and I were growing up, it's just not the same.
Well, I agree with you, but I can't quantify that.
Yeah.
What do I say? 50's worth 40, and I just all those numbers I'm laying out there are completely objective. That's why it's ridiculous. I don't know if you were on here. It was funny because I showed my response to a guy that said, because I'm an Ohio State fan, I can't, without being tainted, I can't evaluate the Big 12. That's the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard. I would think that there would be a knock that I couldn't evaluate the Big 10.
But yeah, your biases would come out in the Big 10, but no, I don't think you're that way. I think you're pretty.
But yeah, these are not biased. I wouldn't even know how to. I would have to sit there and say, okay, where is Ohio State strong? Okay, I'm going to weight that a zillion times. Well, I'm not going to do that. So anyone who accuses me of that, they're just trolling or just want to be that way. I don't know. But it's weighted the same way for everyone. And I can go through what I'm going to do, Porter, is I'm going to do a live stream for every conference when I'm done, so I can hear the feedback from everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. That'll be fun. Yeah, it's a fun discussion. I mean, this is the kind of stuff we talk about, in the off season, and I'm glad that you're including major bowl games in there. It's important because those games matter.
And I tripled the weight of those bowl games, meaning I gave 1 point to a bowl victory and I gave 3 points to a major bowl victory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you're doing it the right way too. The way you, like, some bowls weren't major bowls, and then suddenly they are. And
yep.
And I know you've tried the best you can to try to determine, like for, I think back in the 2000s, the Cotton Bowl was not considered a major bowl, which is crazy. The way, growing up in the 70s and 80s, the Cotton Bowl was a huge game.
Yes.
But then they kind of went through this period where they were kind of they were kind of on a tier below the Rose and the Sugar and the Orange. So, but now they're back to where they should be, which is good. It's good for our sport, good for the history of our sport.
Well, that started with the demise of the Southwest Conference, and then it shifted to this odd Big 12 situation. Yeah, and it just kind of got lost. I don't remember what the logistics were in terms of negotiations and contracts, why it got just bumped. But once the Southwest Conference underwent its demise, that's what took the Cotton Bowl back.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had this litany of Texas Tech, Baylor, Cotton Bowl performances and appearances that, were not up to standard. And there were some really good Cotton Bowls in the 2000s, but yeah, they were selecting from, third and fourth place Arkansas and Ole Miss teams taking on Texas Tech teams. Of course, Alabama played a Cotton Bowl against Texas Tech, and yeah, they weren't at that level, but they were able to get back into the mix here in the last 10 plus years.
Well, I think part of it too is the facility is so much nicer than the
Yes.
Bowl. Same thing with the Orange Bowl. So now all these major, and of course it's great to see the Sugar. My two favorites, the Sugar and the Rose. It's great to see those two, the same location as they've always been. They've obviously done a great job keeping up the facilities, and so that's nice to kind of have that that constant, because I'm from Atlanta, and it's part of the most. I mean, it's a growing city. We have a lot of Fortune 500 companies here, but probably the most frustrating thing as a sports fan in Atlanta is that every arena or stadium that I went to as a kid has been torn down. I can't take my kid to, say, Fulton County Stadium and say, "Hey, I saw my first baseball game here." I can't take my kid to the Omni and say, "This is where I saw my first NBA game." It's just. I guess that's the one thing. One thing I'll never figure out as a sports fan is how the lack of sentimental value these old stadiums have to people. People are ready to move on from these old stadiums. I for the life of me, I can't understand it.
I don't remember the details or the timing necessarily, but as what I used to be a huge, enormous baseball fan, is that I heard a couple years ago, well, they tore down the ballpark in Arlington, and I understand decades have gone by, but that was one of the new ballparks that I believe opened in 1994, and they've, it's been 30 years. We're tearing it down, throw up another one.
Yeah.
Less than 30 years. It was about 25 at the time, and they're ready to build a new stadium.
Well, these colleges have shown that if you just keep them up and do facelifts and all this other stuff, you can obviously preserve these wonderful venues and keep them great. I just, but for some reason these pro stadiums are just so, it just has a very disposable feel to them. But
And now, Porter, if there's anybody on the line that is older than the two of us, they would take exception to you saying that the Sugar Bowl is located where it's always been.
Well, I know it was in Tulane Stadium, but I remember the Sugar Bowl is
Sure.
and yeah, it's to me the Sugar Bowl became the Sugar Bowl when it moved into the Superdome, and just had so many huge events in the Superdome. So
now, when you bring up Fulton County Stadium and the Omni, I have to think that there are tons of people our age that, unlike you, did not grow up in Georgia, in Atlanta, or near Atlanta, that just grew up across the nation. And because of the Superstation, we had attachment to America's team, the Atlanta Braves and the Atlanta Hawks. I watched a ton of Braves baseball when I was a kid, and watched a ton of the Hawks on TBS starting in like 1979.
Yeah, you can thank Ted Turner for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I thank him because, or maybe I shouldn't thank him because I could have been doing more productive things with my time, but that's how I spent. Oh, if I could find a baseball game, my goodness, that was everything. So between WGN and TBS, wow.
Golly, it's funny that both of those teams just did not have a lot of success, but people liked them. You build a tremendous fan base by having that access or that taking the games nationwide. So
And you're right. It's funny with the Braves because they made, as you well know, they won the division, made the playoffs in '82, and then the rest of the '80s were just abysmal until, of course, they got that pitching staff together and rode it starting in '91.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite memories of when I was in Athens. We beat Clemson. I don't know if you remember this game. Clemson was ranked like 4th in the nation, and um, Eric Zier and I mean they had a really big night that night, and that was the same day that that the Braves clinched the first division in years. And so you had the Clemson and Georgia fans doing the tomahawk chop before the game, seeing them clinch the division. And then obviously it was a huge game that night. I think they were top 5. Clemson came in there and got beat pretty handily. And that was kind of the Eric Zier's coming out party. That was 91. So
Yeah, Eric Zier. So that was 91. Then, of course, he concluded his 1992 season by beating Ohio State in the Citrus Bowl.
yeah, unfortunately, I mean, those are 2 really good teams. It's a shame they had to play in the Citrus Bowl. They could have, if it were now, that probably would have been a New Year's 6 game. But I do remember, was it Smith, the running back for Ohio State, so good. But that was back when I want to say that Ohio had a huge bumper crop of running backs that year. Was it Ricky Powers came out the same year that?
Well, he was a Michigan back. He came out of Ohio. And
Yeah.
so that Ohio State team in the early 90s, before the rest of their recruiting caught up, I think at one time they had 5 NFL running backs on their roster: Raymond Harris, Carlos Snow, Scotty Graham, Robert Smith, Butler Binote. All those guys played in the NFL.
Yeah, I just remember I was really into recruiting back then, and I remember reading the national recruiting stuff with an actual paper, by the way, not online. And I remember Ohio State fans saying, "Oh, it's okay that Michigan got these players out of our state because we got Robert Smith." So I don't know why I remember that, but it was it was back when. Well, I guess Michigan still comes into Ohio to get players. So
And Robert Smith had such an interesting turn in his career where he burst onto the scene. His first game, much like Maurice Claret, it was on national TV. They were playing Texas Tech. He had a great game. They won. He was supposed to be this, and he turned out to be as good as his billing, just this track star athlete, just Mr. All-American. And he was that good. Then late in the summer of 1991, he was taking summer classes at Ohio State, very serious student, medical student, pre-med at that point. And there was some controversy about him missing football practice and him getting in trouble and being coerced to go to football practice and missing his classes. And he took a stand and missed the entire season. He sat out the entire season in 1991.
Oh.
And you would think in this day and age, obviously, he would have been mad, left. And so, no, he just came back in 1992 and played the next season.
I do remember that when he signed with Ohio State. I do remember him saying the reason he chose Ohio State is because of the medical school. And at the time, I didn't even know Ohio State had a medical school. So I do remember that being one of the reasons he chose Ohio State. So, all right. Well, it's good talking to you, man. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Porter. We appreciate you being here.
All right. See you. Bye.
Good night. Yeah, Robert Smith. If you look at Robert Smith's NFL totals with the Minnesota Vikings, had he played maybe 3 more years, he would be an NFL Pro Football Hall of Famer. He was having those kind of years, 14, 15, 100-yard seasons with the Vikings. Or had they been able to win one more game and get to the Super Bowl. 1998, of course, he played on that 15-1 team that lost the NFC Championship game in overtime to the Atlanta Falcons. And then 2 years later, went and got stomped in the NFC Championship game against the Giants in the Meadowlands. But Robert Smith had just an amazing career, but he was getting beat up. He'd had enough. And he only played, I think, 6 seasons. And he's not going to make the Hall of Fame. But if you look at his numbers, they are Hall of Fame worthy for that time frame. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. But first and foremost, Moose. Look at that. Gifting 5 Voice of College Football memberships. Thank you so much for that, Moose. We appreciate you. And so we're going to give a little bit more clarity to the Voice of College Football memberships, whether those be here on YouTube or on Patreon. So the deal is we started on Patreon with memberships, okay? The reason we have them in both locations is we had built up about 80 to 100 people on Patreon. And then YouTube started memberships. Of course, we were going to go along with that and try to stretch the business and continue to grow. So we started the YouTube memberships. But I didn't want to stop the Patreon memberships. So what we have done is we have done our best to align the two. Now, I do understand that the Patreon membership is like $1 more, but believe me, I've spent hours trying to change it. And there's this convoluted process of trying to lower. You can increase the per month membership total. You can increase the price, but you can't. You have to go through some just ridiculous. I couldn't figure it out. Mike says it's $2 more. So if you want to save $2 a month, but if you don't care, regardless of what it is, you get the same thing. So every time we do something on Patreon or vice versa, we match it. So either way, it matches. Now, that being said, Keith, hang on just a second. So what we have right now, whether that be on Patreon as a member of the Voice of College Football community or here on YouTube, as again, Moose has so graciously gifted 5 of these memberships, you get a Discord link. So you jump on Discord and you can talk college football 24/7, 365 with all these knuckleheads here. And I say that with all affection, with all these knuckleheads here. Also, we provide for you exclusive content per request. So if you have a request for exclusive content, and then I'll make a determination, okay, I think that this has some level of mass appeal, and I'll put this on the main channel and dedicate it to John Doe, or I'll just say, you know what, this is specifically, you want a Fresno State schedule breakdown. Okay, we'll put that on Patreon and or for our YouTube members, and there you go. And we also provided for the last 3 or 4 years exclusively right here with our YouTube members and with our Patreon members, my predictions, which I gotta say are usually pretty darn good. No, I'm not an odds maker. I'm not a handicapper. I am not an expert, but I pick the games right. And I'm not encouraging anyone out there, but if you would have put $100 on every game, both against the spread and against the money line that we predicted here at the Voice of College Football last year, you would have made over $9,000. Okay, let's hit up Keith here. Keith, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark. It's good to talk college football on a Friday night.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah. Just heard today that the Lions signed Steel Chambers as an undrafted free agent.
Good for him. Good for them. Maybe he'll turn out as well as the last Ohio State linebacker that I can remember that played for the Lions, one Chris Spielman.
Oh, absolutely. We loved Chris here. Not when he was down in Ohio, but certainly when he was with us.
It is a bit funny how that worked out because, you know, sure, there are going to be Michigan players that play for the Bengals and play for the Browns and going to be Ohio State players that play for the Lions. However, he was about as ardent, staunch, loyal a Buckeye as there has ever been, ever.
No kidding. Yeah,
Oh,
I remember seeing highlights of him as a freshman on special teams. And that guy was a baller if I've ever seen one.
Did he play on special teams? Because he started at linebacker from day one.
Yeah, but I saw him on special teams as a freshman. Yeah.
He tells a story, Keith, that so he grew up. Well, two quick stories I'll tell you. One would be when they played LSU. This would have been his sophomore season. They went to LSU, and he was asked about the intimidation and the presence and having to face the LSU Tiger fans in Tiger Stadium. And he responds to the reporter, there's only one Tiger Stadium, and that's in Canton, Ohio. so then the other thing he said was he said that he didn't have a decision to make when he was coming out of Massillon, that he was going to Ohio State, didn't have to think about it. He knew where he was headed. And actually, if you recall this, he was on a Wheaties box when he was still in high school. He was like a All-American, just, top of the board player coming out of high school, out of Massillon High School, which is one of the great high school football playing cities in America.
I didn't know that. What year would that have been, Mark?
84 was his freshman year.
Okay.
And
all right, I was in Texas down then. I just wasn't getting everything.
Yeah, so he made a statement that Michigan offered a recruiting visit, and he just thought, yeah, I'll go. I'd like to go see the campus. Sure, this is a once-in-a-lifetime deal where you get to visit wherever. And his dad told him, if you come back here and you have committed to the university, or probably just said that university, you are not stepping a foot back in this house.
I heard that story before. That is funny. Yeah.
Yeah. Chris Spielman. Oh my goodness. 29 tackles against Michigan in 1986.
Wow.
29
tackles. Wow. Yeah. But hopefully Steel Chambers is half or a third of what he was, and we end up with a good linebacker.
Yeah, Spielman wasn't supposed to be a great pro, but he was tremendous as a pro.
Tremendous, yes. Several Pro Bowls and never made All-Pro, but one of the smartest guys that ever played linebacker, too.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. He wasn't well regarded because he wasn't tall enough, fast enough, all those things. But the Lions took a shot in the second round, I believe.
Yeah, I think the Lions learned from the Ed O'Neill or the something O'Neill, Jack Lambert dilemma they faced. Remember, back in the 70s, they could have drafted Jack Lambert out of Kent State. And then O'Neill was out of Penn State, and everybody thought, of course, the Penn State linebacker is better.
Yeah, Lambert was a skinny guy for a linebacker. He was rail thin, but
for a middle linebacker,
Yes.
Yeah, if he didn't play behind the steel curtain, he might not have been much.
Yeah, he was a great one.
Yeah. Was Steel Chambers a 2-year or a 3-year starter for Ohio State? I think he was at least a 2.
Steel Chambers was a running back that switched to linebacker. Let's see. He was definitely a starter for the last 2 seasons. Now in 2021, he played a lot. I don't know if he was technically a starter.
So 2.5 years. How is somebody 2.5-year starter at Ohio State and goes undrafted? That doesn't seem to make any sense, does it?
Well, what college productivity dictates versus what the NFL scouts are looking for, I couldn't really tell you what the knock on him was. I gotta think it was not speed. So yeah, he had 77 and 83 tackles the last 2 years. And like I say, he was more part-time starter, played a lot, 47 tackles the year before that. I don't know what the scouting report, I can look it up to see maybe what held him back.
What was his 40 time and his reps at the, I don't have my computer up, but at the combine, or didn't he run at the combine?
I hope he ran at the combine. If he got invited, yeah, he's got a combine grade here. I watched less of the combine this year than I ever have, so I got to tell you, I don't know.
I'm combine crazed. In fact, when I see mock drafts, I tell everyone, don't even pay attention to that for the combine.
Yeah, I used to watch the combine. Steel Chambers ran a Steel Chambers. His prospect grade was 5.85. Athleticism score 64. His linebacker rank was 15th in terms of athleticism, 19th overall. His 40, where is it? He didn't run the 40.
Oh, he didn't run.
At least it's not listed here on NFL.com. They've got his 20-yard shuttle at 4.23. They got his 3-cone and his broad jump, but no 40.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing him run with the linebackers yet because I was watching it, and both Michigan linebackers, Colson and Barrett, I don't think either one of those ran either.
Okay.
But I think they were both drafted though too. Yeah, just at Chambers, it's kind of a mystery how a 2-year starter goes undrafted.
I don't know, Keith. That's all I got for you. Steel Chambers draft status. I love the draft. I watched this year I didn't watch any of the draft, but I usually watch it start to finish. But in terms of preparation for the draft, I don't do that. So I don't know what the NFL is saying about these guys.
Yeah. I just thought that was interesting that we got him as undrafted. Our GM has found some diamonds in the rough. I forget his name right now, but he got Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 4th round. Yeah, and he's had some 6th and 7th round players even contribute. So he might have found another one in Steel Chambers.
That could be.
Yeah. And I'm almost as big a Lions fan as I am a Michigan fan.
Very good. Well, it's been a rough, 70 years for you, but they certainly had a nice team this past year.
Yes. And yeah, we signed our 2 second contract guys, Amon-Ra and Penny Sewell, to record contracts, which they've probably been both broken already. You know how that goes.
I do.
Yeah. But yeah, I have one question about your program rankings. I saw that you were putting 1st round draft pick in there.
Yes.
Do you also have stats for instance, total draft picks? Do you have that one in there?
Yes.
Okay, you do. Do you have the All Pros in there?
No.
No. How about Hall of Famers?
No.
No. Okay. Yeah. So, you think that would be useful? Yeah. I was just like wondering if you had, if you just have the 1st round draft picks, you'd miss players like Brady and Randall Owl and some of those greats in history that weren't 1st round picks.
Yeah, I'm not so much ranking these programs based on producing quality NFL players. That's not really my goal.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense then. Yeah, okay. Yep. Okay, but that's what I wanted to give you. I just wanted to talk to you about Steel Chambers and just see if somebody else has scratched their head and come up with something different.
Well, there's a lot of good players that don't get drafted. Leonard Taylor was a 5-star who showed flashes of great potential at Miami. For example, he wasn't drafted. There are all sorts of guys that don't get drafted.
There was some
And
great quarterback. Was it Fran Tarkenton that was undrafted?
I think Fran Tarkington was drafted.
Yeah, you think he was? Yeah,
He
but
was
one
drafted.
of the great quarterbacks was undrafted. Was Tony Romo drafted? I think Tony Romo was undrafted.
I think Tony Romo was drafted. You might be thinking about Johnny Unitas.
Maybe that was it. Yeah.
Tony Romo. I'm about 95% sure he got drafted. I'm guessing like a 4th or 5th round.
That's Dak Prescott was a 4th rounder.
No. You are right. Tony Romo was an undrafted free agent.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And Dak Prescott, when he came into the league, I noticed him right away in preseason. I said, "Wow, that kid can play." Yeah. And the 4th rounder beat out the undrafted guy. It's funny how it works, eh?
Yeah, well, they were both underevaluated, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. It's good talking to you, Mark. Have a good rest of the show. I always enjoy seeing you.
I appreciate it, Keith. You have a good night. Thanks for the call.
All right.
Yeah, my recollection of the NFL draft used to be on point. For some reason, I still remember sitting in a control room at ESPN and something coming up about the, I think it was the Paul Palmer 83 or 87 draft. And somebody bet me that I could not name every pick of the first round of the NFL draft that year. And they lost money. But that's gone. That is gone. Also, one time played a fun game with someone who had discovered a website that listed the starting quarterback for every NFL team for every game. So basically, it would show you that in 2005, the Oakland Raiders started 3 quarterbacks, and this quarterback started 12 games. That quarterback started 3, and the other one started 1. And I was able to name all the Oakland Raiders starting quarterbacks back to like the mid 60s. But again, that's my memory banks are being taken up by some other things, I guess, these days. Bilal thinks I look sleepy tonight. Do I look sleepy? I don't feel sleepy. I feel fine. I feel hungry. Maybe not sleepy, though. Well, if you're talking about me, John, I do appreciate that. I'm not necessarily smart. I've had a good memory. Yeah, that's more about just having a good memory. That I don't want to make the confession that my memory is not nearly as good, but the proof is in the pudding. Georgia owns Ohio State. I don't even know what that means. I have no idea what that means. You know what? I have an idea of the intent of it, but it's just kind of a dumb comment. They've played twice. I don't know that anyone can own anyone who's played twice unless the scores were like 65-0. And even then, in this case, the first game was decided in the last 3 minutes of the game, and the other game was decided the last play of the game. Yeah, that's silly. But hey, if that makes you feel better, then that's fine. James Harrison from Kent State, not drafted. Warren Moon, Washington, not drafted. Steve McMichael, don't remember where he played, undrafted. Yes, Tony Romo, I thought he was drafted. Grant Harkington in the 3rd round out of Georgia. Kurt Warner, undrafted out of Northern Iowa. Mike is likening Chris Spielman to Rudy. Okay. I've never seen the movie Rudy. I've not read up on the story of this individual. I know little about him, but I do know this from listening to conversations about him. I believe Rudy, of course, had no business playing for Notre Dame, scratched and clawed, did all the right things to get on the team. We all have a knowledge of the underdog narrative of this. Rudy, I think the culmination of this movie, or the actual Rudy in real life, was that he got on the field for one play for Notre Dame. Let's see, Mike. You're likening Chris Spielman, who was a high school All-American, who was on the Wheaties box. No other high school athlete has ever been bestowed this honor. Was on a Wheaties box, was played at one of the powerhouses in high school football in America, went to Ohio State as the most coveted and prized player in his class, started from game 1 as a true freshman, started every game of a 4-year career at Ohio State, was a 3-time, this is a short list, 3-time All-American, and was a 2nd-round pick in the NFL draft, which would have been, what was he, about the 35th pick of the NFL draft? Was a multiple Pro Bowler who was one of the top tacklers in the NFL, and I believe played, let's see, his rookie year in the NFL would have been 1988. When he played 11 years in the NFL. Rudy Chris Spielman. I'm missing the analogy. Okay. The only thing I see there is maybe not the greatest athlete in the world and not the greatest athlete in the world. That's the only comparison I'm seeing to a certain extent. But when we talk about great athletes, there are great athletes and not, like, you know, when you're watching an NBA game and somebody's not considered a great athlete, but compared to us normal human beings, they're a ridiculous athlete, like the best athlete that ever came out of that particular school's history. But by NBA standards, they're not a great athlete, or by NFL standards, not a great athlete. That's kind of what we're talking about there. I saw a post on Twitter this week that was asking for people to list the greatest football player to ever come out of their hometown. And so I was rather proud, although I've got no reason to be proud because I have nothing to do with it. I didn't do anything. But the best, everybody list the best football player to come out of your hometown, your high school. Best football player. I can think of, I know that there are 2 NFL players that came out of my high school, one during the time I was there and one years earlier. And I also shared a probability and statistics class with a 1st-round NBA player. which we never thought he was going to be a first-round NBA player. And he was a great guy. He's still a great guy to this day. He's actually 50 times the human being that he was a basketball player. But I'm almost positive he led the state in scoring his senior season and went to Ohio University and led them to a ridiculous record, NCAA tournament berth, led the nation in scoring, I believe, as a senior, and impressed people at camps. And that's what skyrocketed him, because he was not on NBA radar. And that was when Dave Jamerson, that would have been the 1985 NBA draft. I think he was the 13th pick in the first round of the NBA draft. And he sat right next to me during statistics class. And we weren't like best buddies, but we were friends. We talked a lot of sports. Our high school basketball team, my sophomore year, he was 2 years ahead of me, I believe, was pretty ridiculous with him leading the way. Okay, so what do we have here? We've got Todd went to high school, or didn't necessarily go to high school with, but the best football player from his hometown is Randy Moss. And is that West Virginia? Somewhere, not West Virginia University, but a town in West Virginia. So give me the best player. Yes, as Clayton is doing here, best player and where they hailed from, where you hailed from. So for me, it's Larry Zonka, Pro Football Hall of Famer, Stowe, Ohio. So for Todd here, it's DuPont High School, West Virginia, Randy Moss. For our guy Clayton, Rocky Blyer, Appleton, Wisconsin. SEC dog, Tracy Walker, the third for current Detroit Lions, close second from my small, Tracy Walker, the third for current Detroit Lions is a close second. Oh, we had a earlier post, I guess, from SEC dog. Alan Bailey. I don't know who that is. Talking about Champ Bailey? Sports Talk with Austin. Lamar Jackson and Teddy Bridgewater. Those guys went to the same high school? That's a coincidence. I can't imagine that that's true. For Jason, it's Butch Woolfolk in college. So does that mean, Jason, that you were telling us that Butch Woolfolk is the greatest player in the history of Michigan football because you went to the University of Michigan? And that's fine. If that's your, I would go the Tom Brady, Charles Woodson route, but maybe you're talking about when you were in college. Dave Brown went to your high school or is from your hometown. Dave Brown, I believe, went to Duke, correct? And then the New York Giants. Bootzilla grew up in the same hometown as Rod Woodson, the great Purdue player, Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, look at that. All right, let's keep running down these Big Ten power rankings post-spring, presented by our friends at Athlon. And so what they're showing us here is we've got Iowa. We've talked about Iowa. And of course, the Iowa situation rests on the quarterback situation, whether that's the health of Cade McNamara or the ability of Brendan Sullivan to learn the offense, which I would think it would take about 40 minutes to learn the Iowa offense. And new coordinator Tim Lester has to be an enormous upgrade over Brian Ferentz. Number 7, Nebraska. True freshman 5-star Dylan Raiola, of course, leading the offense, and his progression is going to be key. The rest of the team on both sides of the ball, I think, is strong, decent, capable, competent. I don't think there's an outstanding position group on that team, but there's not a weakness, a severe weakness. Now, Wisconsin, I would rank ahead of Nebraska right now. They only averaged 4.8 yards per snap in conference play in 2023. Tyler Van Dyke, again, if you would show me Tyler Van Dyke's touchdown to pick ratio right now for 2024, I would have a pretty good read on what they would do this year. Lost Braylon Allen. Ches Malusi needs to stay healthy. Washington. This is the biggest wild card in the conference. New head coach, new coaching staff, new conference, new quarterback, and just about everyone's gone. Just about everyone's gone from this team. Quarterback, offensive line, receivers, defense. 2 starters back. Rutgers. The interesting storyline concerning Rutgers football is that Gavin Wimsatt, who led them to a bowl victory last year for the first time in a decade, lost the starting job to the Minnesota transfer, Athan Kalkumanis. So Rutgers is making a very clear distinction that they are going to run the running backs, and the quarterback is going to be a passing quarterback from the pocket. They are going to be a much different offense than what they've been under Greg Schiano. Expect them to be a little bit more pass heavy and play action pass heavy, playing off of that run game. But of course, Kalkumanis is not a guy that's going to run around or present any kind of running threat. They don't have any called running plays for him, nothing of the sort. So this is the change in philosophy that has caused Gavin Wimsatt to transfer to Kentucky. At number 11, so according to Athlons, they like Rutgers over Maryland. Much of that has to do with the quarterback battle ensuing at Maryland with Talia Tagovailoa gone and losing all 5 offensive line starters. MJ Morris, based on play in college, should be the starting quarterback at Maryland. It may turn out to be Billy Edwards, and there's also a third option there. But MJ Morris had some nice games at NC State. Maryland is a much better team on both sides of the line of scrimmage and were last year than they've ever been in the Big Ten. Michigan State with Jonathan Smith, of course. I've got tremendous respect for Jonathan Smith and all that he's done at Oregon State. He brings in Aiden Childs to play quarterback. They lost a couple standout defensive linemen in Simeon Barrow and Derek Harmon. They've transferred out after the spring sessions. Minnesota, this could be a rough year. They lose their quarterback. Max Brosmer is probably just as good as Athan Kalkumanis. I think that's the projection. Tyler Nubin was one of the best players in the country on defense. They are heavily rely on a offensive line and running game, and they've got a brutal schedule. Illinois loses 2 of the biggest and best defensive players in the country, Johnny Newton, who went high in the NFL draft, and Keith Randolph, and they gave up 30 points per game in Big Ten play last year, and they lose their 2 best players. Luke Altmaier back at quarterback needs to be better, needs to take a step forward, needs to be the guy. And they've lost their number 1 wide receiver in Isaiah Williams. UCLA, look at how low UCLA is being projected, but I can't argue with that. Deshaun Foster is a first-time head coach. And again, this could be a video focus of mine in the next couple of weeks, looking at first-year head coaches and how well they've done. Return only 9 starters. And Ethan Garber's at quarterback, most likely. Running back TJ Harden. Now, he's really good. I ranked him as one of the 10 best running backs in the Big Ten. Northwestern, lose Brendan Sullivan. David Braun did a remarkable job. Can he back it up? They have some of the highest production totals coming back from last season, but still don't get much respect. Indiana's at number 17. Curtis Rourke, the Ohio Bobcat quarterback, transferred to Indiana. Of course, this is Kurt Cignetti, who did wonders at James Madison, taking over for Tom Allen. And Purdue, could Purdue be the worst team in the Big Ten? Hudson Card is back. Ryan Walters turned this from a pass-heavy Aiden O'Connell offensive guru under Jeff Brom system to a very defensive-minded team, but they turned the ball over way too much for a non-explosive defensive-minded team. And yes, they've got a tough schedule. We do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Keep in mind that our all-time program rankings are underway from the Pac-12, from the ACC and the Big 12. We've got the SEC and the Big 10 to go. Of course, those are the two conferences that are going to be the most interesting. And then we're going to throw it all together so we can compare all the programs across the nation. And then we're going to go live with you and take your comments, questions, and calls concerning our all-time program rankings. Amazon link in the description section of all the videos, including this one. Please use the Amazon link when you do your Amazon shopping. Same shopping experience. You don't lose anything out of your account. It keeps track of all your purchases and who you are in your account. Trust me. You don't even need to trust me. Just do it once and you will see. Doesn't cost you a penny. Same shopping experience. Use the Amazon link in the description section of all the videos. Coming up every Monday through Thursday, our pride, our joy, our breakfast show, as was described to me at some point this week. It is Wake Up College Football, and it goes live with all of you every Monday through Thursday at 8 a.m. Eastern time. That's 5 o'clock on the West Coast. So if you get up bright and early, guess what? I'm going to be there right with you. So please join us. And I will cook breakfast. But we don't have the technology yet to be able to cook breakfast for you. And you probably don't want me to cook breakfast for you. But you can see what I'm cooking for breakfast. That is our Wake Up College Football show every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. All right, next up would be some Big Ten power rankings coming from some other sources. Let's just briefly go through these because they're probably just about the same, I gotta think. And this is courtesy CBS. Ohio State number 1, Oregon 2, Michigan 3, Penn State 4, USC 5. Exactly the same as Athlon, except Washington up to 6 instead of 9. Nebraska next, yes. Iowa down from 6 to 8, according to CBS Sports. But this was published before the addition of Brendan Sullivan, and there is a comment made here about Marco Lyonez, who's pretty much a forgotten man now that he's going to be the third string quarterback at Iowa. Wisconsin, Rutgers, Maryland, Michigan State, Illinois, Northwestern a bit higher in this ranking. Minnesota a bit lower. UCLA in the same spot. Purdue, Indiana last. That seems to make sense as well. Not too much difference there, again, except for Washington, 3 spots different. And then just randomly, why not hear from Indiana on SB Nation? Because if you're going to talk Big Ten football, you are going to go to our friends at Indiana. So as soon as I can get this stuff off the board, there we go. And this is, what is the SB Nation site for Indiana? I can't even find their name. The Huddle. Okay. Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Penn State, USC. That's the same all over the place. Then it starts to change. Wisconsin, Iowa, Washington, Nebraska, pretty much in the same spot. Whoa, huh? What? Okay. We know we ran into an Indiana football site when we get this power ranking. Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Penn State, USC, Wisconsin, Iowa, Washington, Nebraska. Indiana at 10 because they had a successful spring game with no injuries. And they are feverishly recruiting and signing needs from the transfer portal. Now, let's give Indiana some credit. They somehow were able to get one of the biggest fish of the transfer portal cycle in Kent State defensive lineman CJ West. I don't know if that justifies a number 10 power ranking in the Big Ten, but there it is. Look for the Hoosiers to come out swinging with the strong potential to go bowling by the end of the season. Well, if they're the number 10 team in the Big Ten, they are going bowling. Okay, that's a homer move right there. I get hit up once in a while for making homer moves, which I would argue I don't. But that Michigan State, Maryland, Rutgers, UCLA, Minnesota, Northwestern, Illinois, and Purdue is pretty much in line with the other rankings. But Indiana at number 10 in the Big Ten out of 18. No. Coming up, actually, let's check it out. Let's see if they're on line right now. I'm hoping, I'm praying, I'm believing that we've got, yes, our USC call-in show is going on right now on the USC channel. So head on over there with Tim Prangley and Matt Zemek taking your calls. USC Trojan Conquest call-in show right here at the Voice of College Football. Don't let me stop you. Get on over there. Check out Tim and Matt. And let's see what they're up to.
And stuff to move other big people. So when you look at some of the old greats like
this is what you call
for example,
tease or a preview.
He's a pretty top heavy guy. I mean, he's got like a big gut, but he's strong. He's strong, fast,
over on the
USC
channel. That
then you look at
obviously
the newer tackles like
is underway
Penn
and get there of some sort.
Tristan Wirfs, their legs are massive. I mean, they're very even, big throughout, and I think that's the big difference we're getting to. Is a lot of it is the ability to anchor, coming in, anchor, how strong you are, and being able to use, low like center of gravity.
All right, folks. We do so much appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Thank you so much for all that you do, supporting what we do. Get on over to the USC channel right now, Voice of College Football USC. You can find it very quickly and head on over there. And it appears as though we've got some serious football discussion on the Conquest Call-In show. So you can give Tim and Matt a call. You can just listen in. You can hang out. You can do all the things that you do here, but get on over to USC's channel. And we also get together on Monday night with those two to talk USC football. You're going to see me with another program rankings show. We're going to do all the video postings. Then we're going to go live with every conference. So you will be able to throw your comments, your questions, your debate topics, whatever concerning all-time program rankings once we get them all posted. So check those out, and we will see you soon right here at the Voice of College Football.